Hey guys, welcome back to the Lit series. So I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, everything went well, you're going to do Lit at A level, and very soon you're going to get your set texts. Once you get them, what's next? Well, reading them of course. So today I'm going to be discussing some of the most effective ways you can read your text to prepare for examinations. So let's get started. But let's not really get started, because there's a little bit that you need to read before you actually sink your teeth in to the rest of the text. And the first thing you'll need to read is the blurb, the part on the back cover of the book. And the main reason you want to do that is that blurbs generally contain a lot of information about key themes, characters, plots that you might want to look out for. So as you can see from my example here, lifted off the blurb of a set text I did that has since been retired, it literally tells you about how the play shifts back and forth between centuries, so a little bit about its special form, the natures of truth and time and the difference between the classical and romantic temperaments, so that's a bit about theme, the disruptive influence of sex on our orbits in life, that's a little bit about theme, but also a little bit about characters and their relationships with each other. And it even ends off on a quote, "The attraction Newton left out." And here we can see that sex will be very strongly linked to science as represented by Newton here. And so you can see that from the blurb you see a lot about what the text represents and what it hopes to express. You could also get some really good critical opinions or quotes, which could lend you ideas on what lines of argument to follow. For example, in the same blurb that the extract was from, the Sunday Times is quoted as having noted that the play was a play of ideas, of heartache for time never to be regained, and that gave me some ideas on how to approach the concept of time as represented in the play. Introductions or introductory notes are often really good for this as well, with the added bonus that sometimes they provide key context on the writer and their life. They also frequently feature a line of argumentation, bringing in good quotes about the text and its impact. Once you've read the blurb and any introductory notes, it's time to embark on the first read. And this should preferably be done as soon as possible after you get the text, preferably in a quiet and productive environment, so not a busy cafe or a bus. And what you'll be looking for is pretty much what everyone looks for when they're reading a book for fun or for leisure. The general plot and key characters, any major themes or motifs that just jump out at you. Maybe the color red shows up a suspicious lot, or there's a lot of discussion about familial love. You should also be looking out for any particularly interesting plays on form, structure, perspective, language use, etc. So for example, if it's a novel in first person, is the narrator reliable? If it's a collection of poems, is there a particular structure or rhyme scheme that the poet seems to particularly enjoy? It doesn't need to be super detailed right now, just broad strokes things that really jump out at you, because this will guide your analysis later on. You should also take note of whether you enjoyed the text. It may seem a little besides the point to think about that when you're studying a text for school, but knowing whether you enjoyed the text, and more importantly, why, actually helps you clue in on what elements you want to study further in depth later on. Once you're done with that, test yourself. Try describing the text to a friend who has also read the text before, so you can make sure that you truly understood the text plot/vibe. Once you're done with that, you should start developing a game plan for what you're going to be looking out for in the next read. And also any terms or concepts that you didn't understand, so you can ask your friends, classmates, or teachers about them. You can then progress to the second read, which should ideally happen 1 or 2 days after the first read, at a desk or some other place that you can comfortably take notes. And this time, you're looking out for way more. Beyond just what the major characters, themes, or motifs are, you're now looking out for their development. So how do certain characters grow? Does the connotation of red in page 3 remain constant, or has it altered by the time you reach page 82? All of these will inform how your points in your essay will develop as well. It is also time to scout out interesting and relevant quotes, as well as their locations. In a poetry collection, you might also be looking for any running elements that echo throughout, or similarities and differences in the treatment of similar themes in different poems. Once you've done that, you can proceed to compile notes on what you have figured out. You can also begin researching critical opinions on the themes, motifs, characters you found most interesting and start looking for lines of argument that you can follow. It's also a good time to begin discussing your ideas with your friends or classmates, since you're definitely going to come up with better ideas after discussion. But whatever you do not highlight or underline your text yet, unless you really want to regret it or you have enough money to spring for an extra copy. After that, it's time for your third, fourth, 50th read, because trust me, you're going to be reading your set text a lot. And this should happen after you've compiled your key points of interest and determined your main arguments. So, as little as a few days or as long as a few months after the second read. But I wouldn't recommend that you keep such a long time interval between the second and third read because you might forget what you have learned. This time, or rather these few times, you'll be looking out for important quotes which substantiate your opinions, especially for points for common questions that your teacher may have given you. You should also keep an open mind and search for anything that counteracts or shines a new light on your arguments or anything that you do not understand, because you'll probably have at least a few weeks until your examinations at that point, and you can still afford to learn many new things. In a poetry collection, you should also begin flagging which are the most relevant poems or the poems you're most comfortable with writing about in your essays. While doing these reads, you should be polishing up your notes with additional quotes or evidence, and more importantly, compiling a list of the most impactful, relevant, and important quotes for each topic that you want to write about, because there might be hundreds of quotes that may be relevant to the question, but you can really only afford to write 4 or 5 per point, and that's only if you write a lot. So streamline your work. So you want quality, not quantity here. You should also attempt to explain your points to your friends and classmates, find people who are good at the topic and ask them to poke holes inside your argument and strengthen your arguments that you'll be bringing to the examination. Still do not highlight or underline your text yet, because that's a separate read by itself. Once you're sufficiently confident of your points, your notes, and your list of the most important quotes, you can finally do the annotation read. What you're looking out for is supremely straightforward. You're just looking for the quotes that you have identified as being most relevant and familiarizing yourself with their locations in the text. Any interesting similarities or differences between your important quotes and chosen lines of arguments for the different texts might also be really useful for the comparison question in papers 2 and 3. Do be sure to come up with a coherent and consistent color coding system, making sure that you have enough highlighters for all the points you want to note down. In my experience, it took me about a 12-pack of knockoff mile liners to annotate one 200-page book, but your mileage may vary. From my experience, simultaneous underlining and highlighting was allowed despite a bit of ambiguity in the SEAB document, but different schools have different regulations, so do be sure to check with your teachers ahead of time. And you're finally ready for the pre-examination read. This should be done in the days leading up to the examination. It's actually better to do it in a slightly noisy room because it's practically impossible to get a perfectly quiet and conducive examination hall, and you want to replicate exam conditions as much as possible. Before you do your read, go through your notes and recall what you found most important about the text. You'll be wanting to look for the locations of the quotes you found most important, and just familiarize yourself with them so you can flip to them quickly during the examination. More importantly, you may want to look for anything new or interesting that you previously had never noticed, because there's sort of a pre-examination clarity that comes with the read. Once you're done with that, you're ready to go and ace that test. So yeah, those were my pointers on how to read your set text more effectively. If you found it helpful, please leave a like or even a comment. I'm going to be going way more in depth into specific set texts and even different question types as the series progresses. So if you want to hear more from me, Don't forget to subscribe. That's all from me today. See y'all next Tuesday. Thanks. Bye.